At the most talked about wedding of the year, where two wealthy and traditional families were celebrating not only the union of their children but also the merging of their fortunes, a simple waitress would ignite a spark that could set the whole event ablaze and change the fate of everyone present. Every family hides its secrets, especially when $1 billion inheritance is at stake. And, among the forced smiles and the clinking of champagne glasses, one question hovered in the air: who here was lying, and who was the innocent victim? You will discover this truth through the eyes of Clara Wynne, a young waitress accustomed to doing her duties competently yet invisibly, but who, on that night, by sheer chance, would become the key piece in unmasking a colossal lie. Have you ever been to a wedding where something completely unexpected happened? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to read your story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that prove, in the end, the truth always wins. The reception hall gleamed like a temple of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast golden beams over tables immaculately set. Floral arrangements of white orchids and Colombian roses released a sweet, sophisticated fragrance. Waiters and waitresses glided back and forth, carrying trays with clinking glasses and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like sculptures than food. It was the wedding of Celeste Duval, the gracious heiress of one of the city's most respected families, and Dorian Kessler, son of a dynasty steeped in political and corporate influence. The room was filled not only with guests, but with shareholders, magnates, public figures, and high society ladies, all dressed as though parading down a runway of luxury. At the center of it all stood Beatrice Kessler, the groom's mother, reigning like a queen. Her upright posture, the emerald necklace gleaming under the lights, and her critical gaze made everyone around her seek her approval. Yet her voice always carried a note of superiority, and few escaped her sharp remarks. The Duvals, the bride's family, were known for their discreet and elegant tradition. Their fortune came from real estate and art, but unlike many others, they cultivated a reputation for refinement and generosity. Celeste, their only daughter, grew up surrounded by culture, music, and travel, but also by the expectation of upholding the family's good name. From an early age, she displayed a sensitivity that set her apart from the social circles she moved in. The Kesslers, however, represented a different kind of power. They came from a dynasty forged in the iron and fire of politics and ruthless business dealings. Where the Duvals nurtured tradition, the Kesslers flaunted influence. Beatrice Kessler, the unyielding matriarch, had shaped her family into an empire, strategic alliances, political connections, and an endless pursuit of status. For her, Dorian's marriage was not a romantic celebration, it was a contract, a chess move to further consolidate the Kesslers' power. And on that wedding night, the bride's glow was not just the reflection of her crystal-embroidered gown. It was Celeste herself, carrying the naive hope of building a true home, unaware that beneath the veil of promises and alliances lay a secret about to come to light. Amid the splendor of the hall, there was Clara Wynne, quiet in her black uniform and crisp white apron, trying to move with her usual grace. Her job was nothing new. She had worked at countless events for the Duval family and held genuine admiration for Celeste, the bride. Celeste was different from the others. She treated staff with kindness, remembered their names, and offered real smiles. But that night, everything felt heavier. Perhaps it was nerves, perhaps the weight of too many judging eyes. Clara balanced her tray of wine glasses and approached the main table, where Beatrice, the groom's mother, and other distinguished figures were conversing. Then the inevitable happened, a small misstep, almost imperceptible, but enough for one glass to slip and send a crimson streak of wine spilling across the pristine white linen. The hall fell silent for an instant. "Of course!" Beatrice exclaimed, her voice dripping with scorn. "I always say, the simpler the task, the more people fail to take it seriously." Stifled laughter rippled among the guests. A few bridesmaids exchanged knowing glances and whispered to one another with cruel smiles. Clara froze. She wanted to apologize, to clean, to disappear. But what hurt her most was not the spilled wine, nor the red stain spreading across the expensive fabric, it was the cruelty of the words. "Look at her," one of the bride's friends murmured, loud enough for all to hear. "She can't even carry a tray. Imagine the rest." The waitress felt her face burn. She gripped the tray tightly, trying to hold on to her dignity, but her eyes began to well with tears. She would not cry. Not in front of them. She simply gathered the glasses and the stained linen, then quickly left, vanishing from sight in hopes that her absence would erase the incident. The conductor resumed the music, the guests turned their attention back to themselves, and the atmosphere of mockery was once again replaced by artificial laughter. But for Clara, nothing returned to normal. The stain on the tablecloth was small compared to the one now spreading across her own uniform, a constant reminder of the disaster she had just endured. Her face still burning with shame, she took a deep breath but felt tears dangerously close. She knew she could not cry there, in front of them. She needed a refuge. Holding the tray firmly, she walked quickly toward the back, pretending to fetch more glasses. Once she found a quiet side corridor, she leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to catch her breath. Her blouse, soaked with wine, clung to the dark fabric, making it clear she could not continue serving in that state. She decided, then, to slip into one of the staff dressing rooms to change. More than changing clothes, she needed to cleanse her soul of the suffocating feeling of being ridiculed. Clara didn't know it yet, but at that moment, as she withdrew from the hall in search of silence, she was about to stumble not upon a change of uniform, but upon the most scandalous secret of the entire celebration. The staff dressing room was small, hidden behind a narrow corridor, far from the music and artificial laughter that still echoed in the main hall. Clara hurried inside, closing the door behind her as though trying to keep the world out. The cold, damp fabric of her blouse clung to her skin, reminding her with each second of the fiasco she had just endured. She sighed deeply, and for a moment, allowed a single tear to run down her cheek. It wasn't only about the wine stain. It was about the humiliation, about Beatrice's words still vibrating in her ears like sharp blades. Clara opened the narrow locker she always used when working for the Duval family. Inside, she kept a spare change of clothes, as she did on every important occasion. As she pulled off the stained uniform, she heard the muffled sounds of the distant hall, the orchestra, the toasts, the rehearsed conversations. But then, an unexpected noise caught her attention, hurried footsteps and hushed voices coming from the corridor next door. She paused for a moment, clutching the clean uniform against her chest. It wasn't unusual for guests to wander into the back halls, but there was something in those voices, something urgent, too intimate to belong in the middle of a wedding celebration. Clara crept toward the half-open door, cautiously. She didn't want to be caught again in an awkward situation, but her curiosity was stronger. In the dimly lit corner of the corridor, she recognized two familiar figures, Dorian Kessler, the groom, and Lydia Carrigan, the maid of honor. At first, Clara thought it was just a last-minute discussion, maybe about some detail of the ceremony. But the closeness between them, the way Lydia held Dorian's arm, and the almost conspiratorial glow in their eyes told another story. "You know we don't need to hide," Lydia whispered, caressing Dorian's tie. "No one suspects a thing." Clara's heart raced. Her instincts told her she shouldn't be listening, but her feet refused to move. Dorian sighed, pressing his forehead against the wall as if bearing a heavy burden. "It's not that simple, Lydia. I need to marry Celeste. I need the Duval fortune. Without it, I'm finished." The words landed like hammer blows on Clara's chest. Lydia chuckled softly, as though his despair were nothing more than part of a game. "Finished? Dorian, you're a Kessler. You always get what you want." He pulled her by the waist in an intimate, daring gesture. "I just need you to trust me. This is temporary. As soon as I stabilize the companies, you know you're the one I truly want by my side." Clara clapped a hand over her mouth to smother her shock. The white dress waiting at the altar, the carefully written vows, the hopeful gaze of sweet Celeste, all of it was nothing more than a charade to cover up Dorian's financial ruin. If it had been someone else, they might have turned away that very instant, pretending they had heard nothing. But Clara was not just anyone. She had worked for the Duvals for years, knew every detail of that house, that family, and held an admiration for Celeste that went far beyond professional respect. Celeste treated her as someone worthy of attention, always asked about her mother, always smiled warmly whenever she saw her. She did not deserve to be deceived in such a cruel way. Outrage consumed Clara. Her hands trembled, but her mind, still in shock, began searching for a way to record what she was seeing. Then, almost without thinking, she pulled her phone from the pocket of her apron and activated the camera. The screen lit up faintly against her face as she carefully adjusted the angle, hidden behind the half-open door. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the two might hear it. On the screen, the scene unfolded with chilling clarity, the groom and the maid of honor, far too close, exchanging confessions that could ruin not only a wedding but the image of two powerful families. "I promised," Dorian insisted, his voice dripping with false tenderness, "this will be over soon. We just need to keep up appearances until everything is settled." Lydia kissed his cheek, smiling with satisfaction. "Then go on, darling. Pretend you love the bride. Pretend this wedding is real. Later, the two of us will have what we deserve." Clara ended the recording, clutching the phone to her chest as if it were a dangerous weapon. Her whole body trembled. Back in the dressing room, Clara closed the door carefully and leaned against it. She was breathless, as though she had run for miles. On her phone screen, the brief video seemed to pulse. It was short, but powerful enough to destroy not just the ceremony, but the reputation of two entire families. She looked at her own reflection in the cracked mirror on the wall. The face still marked by the shame of recent humiliation now blended with the shock of carrying such a colossal secret. The dilemma began to gnaw at her thoughts. If she showed the video, Celeste would be devastated and remembered forever as the bride deceived at her own altar. But if she kept silent, she would be complicit in a cruel lie. Clara knew that of all the people in that hall, Celeste was the last to deserve this. Her kindness had always inspired Clara, even on the hardest days. She recalled the time Celeste, without hesitation, had helped a waiter injured during an event, calling a doctor and making sure he was well cared for. Or when, still a teenager, she had insisted on giving away part of her birthday gifts to poor children. How could someone so pure be on the verge of such brutal betrayal? Outside, she heard the master of ceremonies announcing for the guests to gather for the start of the celebration. The orchestra tuned once again, hurried footsteps echoed in the corridors. Clara wiped away the tears she hadn't realized had fallen. She adjusted her clean uniform, took a deep breath, and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Now, she was no longer just a waitress trying to recover from humiliation. She was the sole witness to the sham that propped up that wedding. And deep in her chest, a certainty began to grow: she could not simply ignore what she had seen. She didn't yet know how, but the truth had to reach Celeste. And when it did, no orchestra, no rehearsed smile, no emerald necklace would be able to cover the scandal about to erupt. When Clara returned to the main hall, the orchestra had already resumed, lulling the guests into waltzes and animated chatter. The freshly pressed uniform she now wore seemed to erase the earlier accident, but inside, nothing was in order. Every step she took between the tables came with the strange sensation that she was carrying dynamite in the pocket of her apron. She gripped the tray tightly, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The recorded video still seemed to burn inside her phone, begging to be shown to the world. As she approached the main table again, Beatrice Kessler caught her with an ironic smile, the kind that didn't need words to wound. But the matriarch couldn't resist adding poison. "Ah, you changed clothes," she remarked loudly, so those nearby could hear. "Be careful this time while serving. The spotlight should be on the bride and groom, not on a clumsy waitress." Some guests laughed, others pretended not to hear. But this time, Clara did not falter. The humiliation still stung, but the indignation inside her burned far stronger. She simply bowed her head in silence and kept serving, as if Beatrice's words were nothing but wind. As she moved toward another table, Clara overheard two whispers nearby, coming from a group of bridesmaids leaning in to talk. At first, she thought it was another taunt aimed at her, but the words stopped her in her tracks. "Poor thing," said one of the young women, a venomous smile curling on her lips painted red. She has no idea she's being betrayed. Exactly, replied the other, fanning herself with indifference. The groom barely hides what he feels for the maid of honor. Everyone knows. Everyone but the bride, of course. It's almost cruel to watch. Clara shuddered. So it wasn't just her. Everyone there, or nearly everyone, knew about the betrayal. They laughed as if it were part of the spectacle, as if Celeste were nothing more than another pawn in a theater of convenience. Her heart clenched. For an instant, she wanted to cross the hall, embrace the bride, tell her everything, protect her. But when she looked at Celeste, so radiant in her wedding gown, smiling without the faintest idea of the shadows closing in, Clara felt a knot tighten in her throat. The tray weighed heavily in her hands, not from the crystal or the wine, but from the weight of injustice. Clara remembered the first time she met Celeste, still a teenager. She recalled the gentleness with which the young heiress had asked her name, and the way she had always insisted on calling her by it. Celeste never treated employees as invisible, never drew lines between rich and poor. And now, it was this very kind woman who was being deceived so cruelly. Clara drew a deep breath. The hall seemed to spin around her, the light from the chandeliers flashing like accusatory stares. The guests' artificial laughter echoed like a cruel melody against her convictions. Should I show the video? Should I ruin this wedding? She thought. Or should I keep silent, like everyone else, and pretend I saw nothing? The answer burned inside her. This was no longer about the shame she had endured. It was about justice. About the dignity of someone who did not deserve to be used as a stepping stone to save a failing empire. Clara walked to the back of the hall as if seeking to compose herself, but her eyes never left the bride. Celeste chatted happily with relatives, completely unaware of the looks of pity and irony surrounding her. Clara slipped her hand into her pocket and squeezed her phone tightly. She felt the faint vibration of the screen against her fingers, as if the device were a beating heart, carrying within it the truth everyone else chose to ignore. Suddenly, Celeste raised her eyes and, by chance, met Clara's gaze. It was only for an instant, but the waitress felt that look spoke louder than words. A look full of innocent trust, unaware that betrayal was only a few steps away. Clara quickly looked away, swallowing the emotion rising in her throat. But inside her, a decision was taking shape. She could not allow Celeste to be deceived. Not even if she had to face the weight of that revelation alone. While the orchestra rehearsed the bridal procession, Clara stood at the edge of the hall, her hands hiding the phone inside her apron pocket. Her eyes, however, revealed everything, fixed on the luminous figure of Celeste, filled with both pain and determination. There, in the face of blatant injustice, Clara knew she would not remain silent. And in silence, she clutched the phone to her chest as if holding a sword. The fate of that wedding was now in the hands of a simple waitress. The gentle music of the orchestra seemed to cradle the hall in false tranquility. Between glasses raised in toasts and conversations that sounded more like competitions for status, Celeste Duval moved among the guests like a radiant star. Her silk gown, embroidered with delicate crystals, reflected every beam of light from the chandeliers, and all eyes admired her. Clara, however, saw beyond the glow. She noticed the flawless smile that hid her innocence, the sweet demeanor that suspected nothing. She pressed the phone in her pocket as if it were a dangerous treasure, knowing that the small device carried within it the truth powerful enough to shatter the entire spectacle. The dilemma still burned inside her, but now it seemed there was only one path left, to tell the truth to the only person who truly deserved to know. Taking a deep breath, Clara waited for the right moment. She approached discreetly, seizing the chance when Celeste stepped away from the group of guests to breathe in the winter garden that connected the hall to a side corridor. Celeste stood with her back turned, gazing at the flowers lit by small hanging lanterns. It was almost a poetic image, a bride on the brink of a destiny she could not imagine. "Miss Celeste?" Clara called softly, almost afraid to break the delicate aura of the moment. The bride turned, surprised to see the waitress there, but her expression quickly softened. "Clara, is everything all right?" You look nervous. Clara swallowed hard. For a moment, she thought of retreating, but the memory of Dorian and Lydia's words pierced her mind like daggers. Then, with trembling hands, she pulled her phone from her pocket and whispered, "I need to show you something. It's important, please, trust me." Celeste frowned, but sensing the sincerity in Clara's voice, she stepped closer. Clara tapped the screen and pressed play. The images appeared, Dorian leaning against the wall, Lydia caressing his tie. His voice was clear, leaving no room for doubt. "I need to marry Celeste. I need the Duval fortune. Without it, I'm finished." Celeste turned pale, her lips parting in mute shock. Tears welled up quickly, but she did not collapse. She only drew a deep breath, as though swallowing a blade. Then came Lydia's laughter. "We'll pretend until everything is settled. After that, the two of us will have what we deserve." The video ended. The silence that followed seemed heavier than the sound of the orchestra, heavier than all the voices in the hall. Clara watched the bride with her heart tightening. I couldn't let you be deceived like this. I'm sorry if this isn't the right moment." But Celeste did not answer right away. Her tearful eyes remained fixed on the lanterns above, as if fighting an internal battle between despair and courage. When she finally turned back to Clara, there was no hysteria, no screams. Only determination. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice trembling, yet firm. "Thank you for showing me." Clara hesitated. "Do you want me to show it to someone else?" "I can tell your family, stop the ceremony." But Celeste interrupted her with a gentle gesture. And, surprisingly, she smiled. A small smile, yet full of meaning. "No," Celeste said, her voice calm but steady. "Not now." Clara widened her eyes. "What will you do?" The bride drew a deep breath and, with a faint, almost enigmatic smile, took the waitress's hand. Her gaze was intense, but impossible to decipher. "Leave it with me," she whispered. "I'll decide how this story ends." A shiver ran down Clara's spine. There was no explicit anger, no vow of revenge in Celeste's voice, only an unexpected calm. But it was that calculated silence that unsettled her most. Would the bride use those images against the groom, or would she choose to go through with the wedding, erasing forever the proof of betrayal? She didn't know. No one did. The only certainty was that, from that moment on, the fate of the ceremony rested in Celeste's hands. Back in the hall, Celeste walked with the same serenity as before, as though nothing had happened. Her smile remained intact, her posture impeccable. No one could have imagined the weight of what she had just discovered. From a distance, Clara studied her every move. She expected to see cracks, tearful eyes, trembling hands. Instead, she found an unsettling composure. Celeste greeted guests, accepted compliments, posed for photographs, as if she were unchanged. But something was different, something Clara could not name. It was not anger, nor resignation. It was a restrained light in the bride's eyes, as though she had made a decision she kept only to herself. And that left Clara even more confused. Would Celeste reveal the truth she had just witnessed, or would she bury it forever in silence? Meanwhile, the master of ceremonies announced that everyone should take their seats for the bride's official entrance. The hall grew increasingly solemn. Guests took their places, the orchestra tuned the final notes, and photographers' cameras were ready to capture every second. Beatrice Kessler smiled with satisfaction, proud of the perfect union she had helped orchestrate. Lydia, the maid of honor, adjusted her dress with calculated poise, her eyes glittering with confidence. Dorian, meanwhile, wore a broad smile, as if he were the leading man in a fairy tale written just for him. Clara moved between the tables, serving glasses and feigning composure, though her attention lingered on every detail. Her heart pounded quickly, though she couldn't explain why. She had no certainty about what Celeste would do. Everything seemed to proceed normally, like any other luxurious ceremony, but an invisible tension hung in the air. To everyone else, it was just another impeccable wedding. To Clara, it felt like watching a scene on the verge of something unpredictable, and only the bride knew what was to come. At the end of the corridor, the doors opened. The guests rose in expectation, and the bridal march resounded through the hall with grandeur. Celeste appeared radiant, her long veil trailing along the carpet as camera flashes lit up her serene face. To all, she was the perfect image of a bride walking toward her dream altar. Clara, however, felt a chill. She studied every gesture, every expression, trying to decipher what lay behind that calm smile. And amid the applause and sighs of admiration, one question hung in the air: was this the beginning of a new life, or the moment when all the masks would fall? The orchestra played a solemn melody as Celeste Duval walked the aisle. Her white gown shimmered beneath the crystal chandeliers, her veil glided elegantly over the carpet, and each guest rose to applaud her triumphal entrance. The atmosphere was one of staged perfection, as though nothing could tarnish the spectacle so carefully prepared. Beatrice Kessler smiled with triumph, watching the scene as the architect of a grand destiny. Lydia, the maid of honor, barely concealed her satisfaction at being so close to the altar, her eyes gleaming with veiled vanity. And Dorian, the groom, wore a flawless smile, convinced his performance was flawless. The bride took her place at his side, serene, almost ethereal. No sign of nerves, no trace of pain. Only a steady gaze that few could decipher. The master of ceremonies, in a cheerful voice, invited the guests to raise their glasses. It was the official toast, the prelude to the long-awaited I do. The entire hall turned toward the couple, awaiting the words that would seal the moment. Then Celeste lifted her hand, asking for the microphone. The gesture, simple and elegant, did not arouse immediate suspicion. Some guests even smiled, expecting the bride to give an emotional speech. "Before we continue," Celeste said, her clear voice echoing through the hall, "I want to share a few words." Silence fell over the room. The glasses remained suspended, every gaze fixed on her. From afar, Clara held her breath. "I have always believed that a marriage must begin with two simple foundations," Celeste continued, pausing between phrases: honesty and sincerity. "Without them, any union becomes nothing more than a performance, an empty spectacle for others to applaud." Some guests smiled faintly, while others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of where she was leading. Then, the large screen, which moments before had been showing pictures of the couple in happy moments, lit up once again. But this time, it wasn't photos. A video began to play. On the screen, Dorian appeared leaning against a wall, speaking in a low tone, far too intimate to be denied. "I need to marry Celeste. I need the Duval fortune. Without it, I'm finished." A murmur of shock rippled through the hall. Guests covered their mouths, others exchanged incredulous stares. And before anyone could react, the next scene appeared, Lydia laughing, caressing the groom's tie. "We'll pretend until everything is settled. After that, the two of us will have what we deserve." The impact was devastating. Beatrice shot to her feet, pale and furious. "This is outrageous!" she cried, rushing toward the screen controls. "Turn it off immediately." But the video kept playing, relentless, before them all. The truth, at last, could no longer be hidden. Dorian, stunned, tried to maintain his composure, but his expression betrayed him: wide eyes, cold sweat on his forehead. Lydia, at his side, searched desperately for a way out, but the entire hall stared at her as an accomplice. From afar, Clara watched with her heart racing. She hadn't been the one to decide to expose the video, but seeing Celeste's courage in action filled her with pride. When the video ended, the hall sank into absolute silence. No musician dared to play, no guest dared to speak. Only Celeste's footsteps, steady and resolute, echoed through the room. She extended her hand and removed the ring from her finger. With the same serenity with which she had entered, she turned to the groom and spoke in a clear, unwavering voice that reached every corner of the hall. "A marriage must be born out of truth, and mine will not be built upon falsehood. I would rather walk alone than live surrounded by lies." She placed the ring in his trembling, useless hand. Then, turning to the groom's mother, her gaze held no anger, only disappointment. "And as for you, today you made it clear you believe wealth and arrogance can buy respect. But it is not power that honors a family, it is the dignity with which we treat every person, regardless of their place in society." For the first time in many years, Beatrice found no words. What followed was a whirlwind of voices. Guests whispered, some recorded with their phones, others quietly slipped away in shame. What was meant to be the union of two powerful families had turned into a public spectacle of ruin. Dorian stood frozen, his face tense, unable to defend himself. Lydia lowered her eyes, desperate to escape the accusing stares. And Beatrice, once so imperious, seemed diminished in the face of the bride's unexpected strength. From her discreet position, Clara watched with tear-filled eyes. She knew she wasn't the protagonist of this story, but the memory of having entrusted the truth to the bride filled her with indescribable peace. When the ceremony was officially ended, Celeste withdrew to one of the side corridors, away from the confused crowd. Clara followed at a distance, hesitant to intrude, but the bride noticed her presence. "Clara," Celeste said, softening her expression for the first time that night. "I couldn't have done it without you." The waitress lowered her head, overwhelmed. "I only did what I thought was right." Celeste smiled, tears finally streaming down her face, not from weakness but from relief. "Know that your courage changed the course of this night. And you won't go unrewarded. I want to help you, just as you helped me." Clara's chest warmed. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just a worker lost in the shadows of luxury. She had been the voice that revealed the truth. Back in the hall, the celebration no longer existed. What remained were fragments of a broken spectacle, flowers that had lost their charm, music cut short, smiles frozen in place. What had risen as a celebration of power had dissolved into shame. Yet for Clara, there was no regret. That night, she discovered that even someone simple could change destinies. That truth, once revealed, was stronger than any fortune. And as she slid her phone back into her pocket, she smiled silently. She knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter, for Celeste, for herself, and for all who believed that lies could reign forever. The truth may wound at the moment it is revealed, but it is also the only force capable of setting us free, of restoring us, of showing who we truly are. Because lies may last for a while, but truth always finds its way to shine. If this story touched you, write truth in the comments and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that prove, in the end, the truth always wins.